This is this underlying dynamic that I think is just baked into the system, baked into fiat, baked into the way that we approach money and we approach investment and all of the financial abstractions that have been built on top of that. And we just have abstractions on top of abstractions. We have derivatives on top of derivatives. And we've lost sight of what is the core purpose, what is the real purpose of money, of a financial system. Why do we have a financial system? Why is finance good or beneficial? What does money do? And we've taken it to have a reality of its own, that money has its own existence. And I'm gonna argue and lay out some principles that money's existence is really important. It's an incredible institution, but it's interrelated with the real world. It's interrelated with all of these other things. And it's the same thing of what I said. Money's only relevant insofar as it relates to these other real structures. Bitcoin's only relevant because there's a problem with money, right? If there wasn't a problem with money, it wouldn't matter. Bitcoin's a very inefficient system. It's very important that it has those inefficiencies, but the reason we pay those inefficiencies is because there's such a profound problem. And I get to it, it's 16 pages and I barely mentioned Bitcoin once. And at the end, I apologize to my readers and they say, I've been very rude to you guys. The only reason you're reading this is because you like Bitcoin and I haven't even talked about it. But it's because it's so important. It's because Bitcoin is contextualized. Bitcoin is understood in its relationship to fiat. Like they're in a dialogue. I think I said that on our last time we spoke, that they're just intrinsically in conversation with each other. There's going to be a relationship, and I think it goes very deep. We just announced we're doing a fundraising initiative with the Bitcoin Policy Institute.
Yes.
And you know who they are. If the listeners, they don't know who they are. It is a collection of what I have personally assessed through hours of conversation to be, in my opinion, some of the best, smartest, most high quality academics that are interested in researching and publishing on Bitcoin. Not only are they really intelligent, there's a lot of smart people in the world, but in my conversations with them, I think they represent Bitcoin well. I think they understand Bitcoin well, and for the right reasons. And so Swan is working with them to raise money to publish papers in academic journals. And the point of this is, recently in the US, we had the White House report on Bitcoin mining. And basically, just to keep this short, it cited a bunch of digiconomists, DeVries research, and like Mora et al. Yep. And like literally, so this research, it's not, reasonable people can have different opinions. It wasn't, I'm skeptical of Bitcoin and I'm over here liking Bitcoin. It's like factually incorrect stuff, like a claim that miners throw out their ASICs after 1.5 years. Yeah. That's so false. If that's true, Bitcoin community, I will take all of your 1.5-year-old ASICs. You give them to me, I will recycle them. But no one's going to do that because that's complete false information. And so this is a problem because it's not just reasonable people can disagree. If it was just skeptical, oh, we think it's more vulnerable, we think it's this or that, okay, fine. It's still worth researching. But this is outright false information, and those are my words. And we think it's time that Bitcoin was represented in academic journals appropriately, because we've waited, right? We've waited years, but it just seems that, and there have been a couple, but it seems like there are very few papers and very few academics, especially outside of the BPI fellows, that have stood up to maybe not represent Bitcoin, because it does need to be neutral, it does need to be credible, right? But to not come at Bitcoin with this heavy bias that we're seeing in this other reports, and to represent it. So anyways, we're fundraising, all the money goes to publishing papers. If we raise enough money, buying out these fellows' course loads, so they just research Bitcoin full time. We think it's going to be really good for America and policy and DC, academic research, and we're just committed to making that happen. Let me start with one principle that I want to just set the stage with, and then I'll answer that question. And so this is important for the audience to think of, because this doesn't get stated clearly. This isn't well understood. And this is like a first principle, and I want you to keep this in mind as you listen to this whole dialogue and this whole episode. Money, while abstract, while symbolic, represents something fundamentally real. And what that fundamentally real thing is the world of atoms and molecules, factories and cars, labor and people's time, right? These are all tangible things. They're not abstract, real, they're measurable. And money in its proper form, and always, it can just be distorted, but it always is symbolic. It is representative of this real stuff. And this is both in a measuring way, which is price, the price of the water bottle. It's measured in money. Money's the measuring unit, the denominator, the unit of account. But also it is, we're going to talk a lot, I'm going to talk a lot about interest rates, because we'll mention money printing too and expanding the supply. That gets a lot of time and attention. I want to also really focus on interest rates because that's an important thing. And so what are interest rates? They're not an arbitrary thing. If you left a market to its own natural state and you didn't intervene in any way by a central authority, there would be a natural interest rate that money would be lent at. Not because a bank said this is the interest rate or this is what the loans need to be, but because the market would naturally aggregate and compute the availability of capital, which we're going to define soon, physical resources, valuable stuff. We'll give a much better definition. The availability of entrepreneurship, as in business people who have ideas or companies to invest money in, right? If there's none of those guys, there's nothing to lend money to. So the availability of physical productive resources, the availability of both entrepreneurs and the quality of those entrepreneurs, and the availability of basically skilled workers and a labor force able to do it. And so the interaction between all of those things produces the natural interest rate. And that reflects the real world. That reflects reality. It is this incredible translation of this thing we can never measure, because it's not only all the physical resources, but it's people's subjective values of things, their perceptions of the future, their ideas and intuitions about what future people will want or value. And you can never measure those things, right? It's not physics, it's not objective in that way. And yet somehow the institution of money is able to compress all of that into a number that everybody can relate to. And so when a central authority comes in and they say, oh, they find a naturally occurring market with an interest rate of 5%, and they say, no, you can only lend at 2%. We're going to artificially cap that. They are sending a signal to every economic actor saying reality is not as it appears. Reality is not this world of 5% where capital has a certain availability. It's actually this world of 2%, which signals like capital is more abundant typically. And we'll get into all of that, but the thing I want to leave people with is that price, interest rates, the ability of money to store value, they are symbolic representations of the real state of the world. They're not abstract, they're not set. And when you distort that, you send a signal to every economic actor that reality is different, but it's not different. And this causes problems. I want to start there. Money is communication. Money is information in a certain source. And Alan Farrington does a phenomenal job of, I want to make this point, and I'm pulling it fully from Alan. It's common that people say money or price contains information. And this is like something that gets said. And Alan does this phenomenal job of refuting that in an interesting way, where he actually says price, if you're going to say it contains some information, yeah, of course it contains some information. But the important thing that he says is that price actually reduces information to the bare necessity. So what's really cool about price, and I use this example of a banana in the article, of saying, okay, if you have a banana and you go to the store and this banana costs 50 cents, what information can you reconstruct from that price? Because if price contained information, it would be in there somewhere. Can you reconstruct how much rainfall the farms got, how many farms were competing in this market, the cost of their labor, how much humidity? know. Like you can't figure any of that out. All you know is it costs 50 cents. Price allows people to coordinate, right? And it reflects obviously supply and demand. It reflects the availability of goods and the demand for those goods. And so bringing it back to this discussion of like capital formation, if you're an entrepreneur and you're making a business plan, let's say you want to make a shipping company, you use trucks, you're a trucking company, you need to know how much a truck costs to know how much money to raise, to know if your business is going to be profitable, to know how much you need to charge for your services, right? If a truck costs $1 million a truck versus $10,000 a truck, that makes a huge difference. And so the price allows entrepreneurs to create businesses and to plan and to price things. And it allows this synchronization, this order. It allows this spontaneous order to emerge because people can compare things, people can make decisions, and it reflects obviously supply and demand. And so you have this problem in systems, right, where if you distort price, if you print a bunch of money, if you lower interest rates, if you manipulate money as the denominator, money as the measuring stick, you make it tremendously more difficult for entrepreneurs to make good decisions. So interest rates will emerge naturally, right? We looked at the Leadin dashboard, right? Nobody told those guys, hey, here's what you should lend at, right? There is an interaction between the supply of capital, of money, and so in a market, there's the availability of capital and physical resources. There's the availability of talent, entrepreneurship, like projects to lend to, the quality of those projects, and the demand for those loans. And all of those kind of come together and synthesize a bunch of information and produce the interest rate. And if capital became incredibly abundant, that interest rate would come down. If capital got incredibly scarce, that interest rate would go up, all else equal. And so you have this problem. I think it might be helpful. So one of the things we see with artificially low interest rates, so we have actually like a lot of history of this. If you look at the 1700s in England, if you look at the 1800s, you can find all of these examples. This is not the first time in history we've tried artificially low interest rates. People have had the brilliant idea multiple times that we're going to rise our way to abundance, that if we can just manipulate the money in the right way, if we just make more money, make money abundant, then we'll have growth. And it goes pretty much the same way every time. It produces speculation, it produces asset inflation, it produces capital misallocation, and eventually that kind of collapses in on itself. Money printing gets so much airtime in the Bitcoin community, but the artificial interest rates, I think, are also incredibly damaging.